Hello, my name is Dr. Nicole Mashburn, and I will be one of your instructors this semester. And today I want to talk to you about the beginning of the course, basically Chapter 1. I'm going to introduce Chapter 1 and what we're going to learn for the rest of the semester. Okay, so what is anatomy and physiology? Anatomy is basically where is it? Okay, so when you're trying to find something, you're talking about the anatomy. And the physiology is what does it do? So when you're looking at anatomy, we're talking about the study of the structure. What does it look like? So we're talking about gross or macroscopic, so we're talking big anatomy, like your regions, like your whole head or a surface, or maybe even systemic, like your whole heart system or your kidney system or your stomach. So I'm using kind of broad names now because we're going to refine that and learn the real terms, but you guys haven't had anatomy yet, so you'll learn. We also have microscopic anatomy, and that's when you're talking about like cells and tissues, like blood cells or skin. So if you're talking about cells, we call it cytology, like the study of certain types of cells that make up our body. And if you put cells together, they form tissues, and we call that histology. You can also study anatomy as a person grows from fertilization through being an embryo and a fetus and a baby, and on into childhood, adulthood, and on into geriatrics and then death. And so we can call it developmental anatomy. So we look different when we're in utero than we do at death. So obviously we change, so we can talk about anatomy that way. Physiology, again, that's what does it do, and that's basically the function. So anatomy is the structure, and physiology is the function. And for this course, we're simply going to talk about function at an organ level, an organ system level, a systems level. So we'll talk about maybe the renal system, which is your kidney and making urine, or the cardiovascular system, your heart and how it pumps blood. So that's what we're going to focus on for if you're taking the 2-semester anatomy class. We'll talk about the muscles, we'll talk about the bones, we'll talk about the nervous system, the brain, and what they do. So where they are, anatomy, and what they do, physiology. When you talk about A&P, or anatomy and physiology, there's something called the principle of complementarity. And essentially that means that you can't study one without the other. They go together. Okay, so to learn the physiology, you need to know where it is. And you know where it is, but you need to know what it does. And in anatomy and physiology, we have a saying that form follows function. So a lot of times if you look at what it looks like, it can tell you what it's going to do. For example, the function of the cardiovascular system, so the heart and the blood vessels, is basically to pump and to transport oxygen and other nutrients throughout your body. Well, that's its function, to move oxygen, blood through your body. Well, its form, what it looks like, is a system of tubes or blood vessels and a pump, your heart. So your heart's pumping blood through those tubes all throughout your body. So form follows function. And you'll learn that as we talk about different organ systems. You'll understand what it looks like, and the structure of it leads you to understand how it works. When we talk about A&P, or anatomy and physiology, we have to look at basically organization. What you'll learn is that anatomists and physiologists love to categorize. They love things to be organized. And so the first thing we learn is basically levels of organization. And so there's basically 6 levels of organization that you'll learn for this course. And the first level is the chemical level. So you're going to learn how things bond chemically, like water and oxygen and carbon and calcium, all these elements, and what do they do? How do they work together? So atoms and molecules, that's your simplest level of organization. The next level is your cellular organization. Okay, so cells, and you put cells together. So for example, red blood cells. You put a lot of red blood cells together and you get blood. So cellular organization. And when you talk about cells, you talk about the parts of the cells, and those are called organelles. And I'll talk about that in just a second. When you take cells and put them together, you get tissues, and that's just a group of similar cells. Take a bunch of different tissues and put those together, and you get organs. So for example, in your heart, you have blood vessels, and you have fat, and you have muscle, and all that works together basically to form the heart. You have organ systems, which is several organs that work together. So, for example, your digestive system, that's one big system, but it has several organs. It has a stomach, a large intestine, a small intestine. Those individual organs work together to form the organ system. If you take several organ systems, or all the organ systems, and put it together, you'll get an organism. Okay, so as a human, I have a digestive system, an endocrine system, a nervous system, a cardiovascular system. So all these systems work together to make an organism. There's a really neat picture in your book, and to kind of show you how these levels become more and more complex. So the easiest, or the least complex level is the chemical level. So you have atoms, and they make molecules. You add these atoms and molecules together, and they're going to form proteins, fats, sugars, carbohydrates. All these things are going to be made, and then you put those together, and you'll get things called organelles. And organelles are parts, I'm trying to write with my mouse, parts of cells. You may have heard like a nucleus, so things that make up cells. So then you take these organelles and you put those in a cell, and now you have the cellular level. Well, if you take up several different types of, or put cells together and make them form a tissue. So take cells, put them together and form a tissue. So for example, in this one we've maybe made some proteins, and then we've added some organelles, and now we've made a muscle cell. We take a bunch of these muscle cells and put them together, and that makes a smooth muscle. If you take lots of smooth muscle and put it together, it's going to basically form an organ. And this particular organ is a blood vessel. Okay, so we're looking at a blood vessel in this case. Now, if we take a blood vessel and add it, say an artery for oxygenated blood and a vein for deoxygenated blood, generally in the body, not always, but generally. And we take an organ, and then we take the heart, so we have arteries, veins, the heart, put that all together, then you'll have an organ system. In this case, we've got the cardiovascular system. Now, if we add the cardiovascular system with the respiratory system and the nervous system and the digestive system, we get the organism. Now, as you're studying this, you want to understand what's the least complex and what's the most complex. So take some time to look at this slide. I like to give you hints about how the tests are set up. So this would be a question that maybe you would put in order from least complex to most complex, or from most complex to least complex, and kind of an ordering question. So make sure you pay attention to this, and as we move on through the semester, it'll start to make more and more sense. Thank you for your attention.